Hi guys, today we're in Northern California and we're taking a tour of the Lake Shasta Caverns. Let's go explore.
The first reported discovery of the Lake Shasta Caverns happened in 1878, but they weren't open to the public until 1964. Tours are offered year-round and take about 2 hours, requiring a moderate level of fitness to navigate the 600 stairs scattered throughout the journey. Descending from the gift shop, visitors board a boat to cross Lake Shasta, which was formed after construction of the Shasta Dam blocked the flow of the Sacramento River. Taking a minute to enjoy the scenery, you board a quick bus ride which takes you up to the cavern entrance, learning a little bit about local history along the way.
It should take us about 10 minutes to get up this road to our visitor center. So the lake was created due to the construction of Shasta Dam, which is the second largest concrete dam in the country. So the largest is the Grand Coulee Dam, and then the tallest is the Thru Dam. The lake is about 400 feet deep in most parts. So the deepest part is right next to the dam, it's around 500 feet. So before the dam was built and the lake flooded this valley was home to about 15 different river towns. So one of those towns is actually important to the story of our cave's first discovery. So that town was the town of Baird. And the town of Baird was home to the first federally funded fish hatchery. If you need a new tongue twister, that's the one for you. So that fish hatchery was built in 1872 by a man named Livingstone Stone. And Livingstone Stone is actually our first documented discovery of the cave. So the second group of documented discoverers were two men, a man named James Richardson and his friend, a native Wintu Indian. His name was Charles Morton. And the reason we mention them, even though they were second place to the discovery of the cave, is because they actually wrote their names on the side of the wall, and we showed it to you guys on the tour. So I'll make sure to point that out to you guys when we get there. And just up ahead, we're coming up on an unobstructed view of the lake. So if you're sitting on this side of the bus and you are afraid of heights, this just became the wrong side of the bus for you. Feel free to stand up to get a better look on this side. I think if we all stand and bounce the bus this way, we'll get the best view.
Before entering the caves, you can make a quick stop at the visitor center to browse some exhibits about the cave's history, formation, layout, and features. And then make your way to the cavern's entrance to meet up with your guide and begin the tour.
So I'm going to go over real quickly just how this cave came to be here, then we'll go over the rules together, and then we'll get started on inside. So first things first, can anybody tell me what type of rock this is here? I'll give you a hint. It starts with lime and it ends with stone. Limestone, yes, good job. So limestone is a sedimentary rock formed at the bottom of the ocean, and it's made up mostly out of dead sea creatures. So you can actually see a bunch of horned coral fossils all throughout the rock, and you'll be able to see a bunch coming down. So right here you can see a few in the rock here, as well as some examples down there. So because it's made up out of crushed dead sea creatures, it has a very high calcium content. So a fun fact about limestone is that it dissolves very easily whenever it comes into contact with acid. So this is a limestone cave, and limestone is found in what's called a karst landform, which is basically just our whole mountainside here. So there are two different ways that a limestone cave can be originally hollowed out. One is from above and one is from below. So from above, the rainwater falls, like it is now, mixes with the soil and creates a light carbonic acid. That acid then hits the limestone, dissolves it, and can hollow out a cavern. The second way happens from below, which is actually how our cave was formed. So back when all of this was underwater, a magma pulse occurred that released hot sulfuric acid that then dissolved the rock and hollowed out a cavern. And then later, when all this water drained out, this cave was already here. So this entrance we'll be going in is actually not the natural entrance. The natural entrance is way up at the top of the mountain, and we won't be seeing it today. This entrance was put in the 1950s by a group of brothers called the Thompson brothers, who did all of the construction inside of this cave to turn it into a show cave. I'll explain more about how we get all of the super cool formations once we get inside of the cave.
I don't want to go. You want to go inside. It's okay. It's just a cave. Look at this. There's light here.
About our cave is that it stays at a constant temperature of 55 degrees year round. It feels more like 70 degrees here because of the high humidity. So it's super cool because in the winter time when it's really cold outside, it's nothing more than here. And in the summertime when it's over 100 degrees, we'll open that front door and it'll relax the natural air conditioning gets up. So it's pretty cool right here because we're right next to the entrance. But as soon as we enter the discovery room, we'll be entering a nice warm pocket of air. So we call this room the discovery room because it was accidentally discovered by the Thompson brothers. So from the natural entrance, you can only access two rooms, the cathedral room and then the basement room. So the Thompson brothers were trying to blast a second entrance to the basement room, but they really got off course and ended up discovering a whole bunch of lower rooms. So this was actually two separate caves, and when they discovered the lower part and the upper part, they then connected them with a tunnel. Second reason this room is called the discovery room is because it's in this room that we can discover pretty much every formation found inside of our cave system. So the filling in process happens from above. The rainwater comes in, mixes with the soil to create that carbonic acid, which dissolves the limestone. And when it dissolves the limestone, it draws the calcium out of it, and the water with the calcium is brought to a room like this one, where it undergoes a precipitate reaction and leaves behind a little bit of calcite crystal everywhere the water drips. So all of the crystal we'll see in here is all made up out of calcite crystal. The first formation I'd like to show you is over here. These little guys are called tubular stalactites, also nicknamed soda straws, because if we were to break one off, it's hollow on the inside and we could sit through it just like a soda straw. So these are formed when drops of water fall from the ceiling. They actually leave behind a small ring of calcite crystal. And as more and more drops fall from that spot, those rings stack up on top of each other, forming these tubes. So eventually what tends to happen is these tubes will get clogged up like this one here, or end up forming a column over here. Now when these get clogged up, the water is forced to run solely on the outside. And eventually this little guy will turn into a big stalactite like this one. So stalactites are currently pretty slow growing. They average about 1 inch of growth for every 100 years, if conditions are constant, which they never really are. So the growth rate in here just depends on the amount of water we're getting. So if we had a year where it rained every day, we'd be seeing a lot more growth. And if we had a year where it didn't rain once, we wouldn't see any growth. So the opposite of a stalactite is just back behind everybody, and that is a stalagmite. Stalagmites are formed when water falls onto the ground, and the crystal will stack up in this cone-like shape. When a stalactite and a stalagmite touch, it forms a column like this one over here. And just beneath that column, this big waxy-looking formation, that is called flowstone. And flowstone is formed when water flows over rock or even other formations, and it leaves behind its own formation that resembles the flow of the water itself. Flowstone is one of the fastest growing formations. It currently grows about 4 inches every 100 years. So just up over here we have what's called drapeolite or cave bacon. You can see how this kind of resembles a little sliver of bacon. So drapeolite is formed when water runs down the side of a wall and leaves behind a calcite crystal trail. The crystal will stack up, and eventually this formation will actually start to pull away from the wall and end up looking like this. And then do you guys notice this line going across the room here? This line goes all the way across the room, this big bumpy line with a small thin line underneath it. It's a water line. So there used to be a pool of water in here that sat at this level long enough for a ring of calcite crystal to start to build up along the edges. So that formation is called shelfstone. Now the crystal can end up putting the entire pool of water in a formation that we call calcite raft. The thing about shelfstone and calcite rafts is they're not very strong on their own. So usually once the pool of water drains, all that crystal will break and come shattering down. So here you can see some still standing calcite rafts as well as some broken bits below. And over on this side you can see that happening down here, and the best example is actually behind that boulder there. Calcite raft is strong enough to support itself, but it might not be strong enough to support you. So sometimes cavers have to be really careful because they could be standing on what they think is floor and end up falling through. It could be a couple inches, a couple feet, or even a couple feet. This piece is really cool. You can see this one on the inside of it. So this room we're looking at is called the dome room. It's 80 feet tall from ceiling to rubble pile. So imagine that there was a pool of water in this room and it didn't quite go all the way up to the top. And it sat there for a long time. The crystal would start to build up along the edges and eventually coat the entire surface of the pool. So creating shelfstone and calcite raft. And eventually, when this pool of water drained out, all of that came crumbling down. Now this is an especially large rubble pile, so our theory is that this happened multiple times over the years. So just to the right of this room, we can see this tunnel here. We call this the Thompson Tunnel. So when the Thompson brothers accidentally discovered these lower rooms, they still needed a connection point from this room to the basement room. They hadn't made the staircase connection yet. So as they were blasting this tunnel here, when they reached that back wall, they actually heard the sound of rushing water behind it. So they decided they'd rather not continue. And just on the back wall there, you can see those dark squiggly things. It is not writing, it's actually the shadows of some other formations. So another really cool feature in this room is this broken stalactite up here. So this stalactite was removed to take samples of, and also so that you guys can see the inside of it. So calcite crystal is actually a very soft crystal. On the Mohs scale, the scale which we measure the hardness of crystals by, a diamond is a 10. Your fingernail could be said to be about a 2.5. Calcite crystal is only a 3 on that scale. So it's a very soft crystal, which doesn't make it very good for mining, which is why we're giving tours instead. When you're staring at these walls for long enough, you can end up seeing things sometimes. So right over here, my flashlight is pretty dim. We have Tina the llama-corn. Her back leg, back, front leg, neck, face, and horn. You see Tina? You can never unsee Tina now. It's impossible. Where? Here we have a left ear. So here, her horn, face, neck, front legs, belly, furry belly, and her back legs. Yeah, and then this one's really hard to see, especially with my dim flashlight. But right by my fingers here is Indiana Jones. He's just a little guy. His back is towards us. He's hanging off a cliff with his right arm. Yeah. And then up here we have some people see an eagle.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
And then back behind us we have the cave dragon. So his horns, eyes, beard, neck, and his belly goes all the way back down there. What do you guys think would happen if there was an earthquake in here right now? So a lot of people say that the inside of a cave is actually one of the safest places to be in the event of an earthquake. So they actually had a fairly large earthquake in this area a while back, and a ton of stuff in the gift shop broke, and there was a tour actively happening inside of the cave, and they came out completely oblivious. They didn't feel it. All right. So this is the crystal room. We call it the crystal room because of this large crystal chandelier up here that's made up out of formations called halictites. So halictites are all these crazy little squiggly crystals growing in here. So halictites are formed when water comes out of really tiny holes in the rock, and the water crystallizes before it has a chance to drip off. So just really tiny influxes or decreases in the water flow changes the shape of these guys. Another formation I'd like to introduce you guys to is corallite, cave coral or cave popcorn. So corallite can be formed underwater or above water. So above water, it usually forms when a room is filled with a pool of water and water droplets are falling from the ceiling and water is splashing out onto the walls, leaving tiny little funky bumpy formations. So this room is super cool because it's the only room where all the walls are almost completely covered with corallite. You guys want to see a few more fantasy formations? Sure. Alrighty. Right over here we have Gary the cave turkey. His head, eyeball, flat, back, and feathers. Oh, yeah. And then we have Santa Claus. And then right up here, if you've ever seen Ice Age, we have Diego the saber-toothed tiger. His right arm, head, mouth wide open, left arm, the rest of his body. And this one's kind of a fantasy formation, but the most perfect slice of cave bacon right in there. Alright, if you look at the ceiling, you can notice that there's not as many large prominent formations going on in here. And we believe that is due to a large clay pocket in the soil right above this room that's basically acting as an umbrella. So the rainwater comes in, hits the clay, and then slides right off into all the other rooms, leaving this room what we'd call a dead room. Now there is definitely some water getting through, and we're starting to see some formations starting to form in certain areas of the ceiling. So this crystal right here was actually placed there specially just so you guys can touch it. So feel free to get a friendly pat along the way if you're curious on what calcite crystal feels like. So remember I told you we'll be able to see an inscription that was made by our second group of documented discoverers. So we are about to pass that. They somehow worked it on there using their kerosene lanterns. And someone once explained to me how that process works, but I forgot. So you might want to ask Cave Dave, or even our boat captain Tim might know. Alrighty, welcome to the cathedral room. This is the last room on the tour, but most certainly not the least. It is by far the tallest room with a 125-foot ceiling. This is the room where we most commonly get our bat sightings. However, we haven't been seeing very many. If you see one, give us a shout out though. So we call this room the cathedral room because of all this drape of light here that resembles a large pipe organ. So this would have been the very first room our first discoverers would have seen. So remember I said we won't be able to see the natural entrance, but we will be able to see a tunnel that leads to the natural entrance right up there. So there is light at the end of that tunnel. That's artificial light, however. The tunnel extends about another 100 feet before exiting the mountain. So our first discoverers would have come out of this hole and rappelled down into this room. And then they would have been exploring this room with their small kerosene lanterns. And they could only see a couple of feet in front of them. So already they don't have the view we have now. But thanks to even more modern lighting, I get to make big reveals. And then I have this one. You have to retake all your photos now. You're welcome.
So is the natural entrance still open?
It is. It is gated off though. It's still open. So that's how the bats get in and out. Is through the natural entrance. Yep. Alright, so we're going to hang out in here for just a few more minutes. So now is the best time to take photos in my opinion. If you would like any assistance in taking a group photo, I'd be more than happy to help. The staircase to exit is right up here, and I'm actually going to follow behind this time to make sure nobody tries to have a sleepover, okay? I'm watching you. All right. It would be this guy. Lights going off in 3, 2, 1.
After taking another set of stairs down to the visitor center, you once again board your bus and then enjoy a final boat ride back to the gift shop. This is a super fun and memorable half-day adventure, which is great for kids and families, and offers an impressive cave experience filled with tons of interesting features. If you're planning to go, be sure to make reservations online ahead of time, as spots fill up quickly on weekends and during the summer months.
Hope you enjoyed touring the Lake Shasta Caverns with me today. Remember to keep exploring. Until next time, it's time to exit through the gift shop.